Welcome back, dear students and friends. We have already started with chapter number 3, human reproduction. Until now we have finished structure of male reproductive system, structure of female reproductive system, and we have also seen the differences between the male and female reproductive system. We have also finished with a gametogenesis in male, that is called as spermatogenesis. Now today we have to learn the gametogenesis in female, and that is called as oogenesis process. What it is called as oogenesis process. Okay, so this is oogenesis process. Okay, what is a oogenesis? You know the meaning of genesis. Genesis means formation. So it is a formation of mature ovum. This process is called as formation of mature ovum. This process is called as oogenesis. Genesis, formation of ovum, that is called as an oogenesis process, as we have seen in the spermatogenesis. Like spermatogenesis means a formation of a sperm. Similarly, the oogenesis means a formation of a mature ovum is considered as oogenesis process. Okay. Now you know that the spermatogenesis process in a male, it starts when a male reaches a puberty. Means he reaches a certain stage of maturity. At that time, the spermatogenesis starts. But in contrast to it, okay, if you compare this oogenesis with a spermatogenesis, this process, oogenesis, starts while during embryonic development. So when the baby inside the lady's womb, at that time the process starts. Okay, that means the process initiates the oogenesis process. Whereas the spermatogenesis process, it starts when a male reaches a puberty. This is the difference between a spermatogenesis and oogenesis. Okay, so when the oogenesis starts, the oogenesis starts during the embryonic development. Okay, so it starts during the fetus development. Okay, similar like a spermatogenesis, the oogenesis is divided into 3 stages. There are 3 stages in the development or production of an ovum. So which are the 3 stages in a development of an ovum? The first stage, it's called as, like similarly to spermatogenesis, it's called as multiplication phase. Second one is called as growth phase. And the last one, it's called as maturation phase. So oogenesis, it occurs in 3 phases. Which are the 3 phases? First is called as a multiplication phase. Second one is called as a growth phase, and the third one is called as a maturation phase. Now let's start how the process is going to initiate. The process starts from a single cell. Okay, there is a single cell. Okay, which contains 2n number of chromosomes. In a human being, it contains 46 number of chromosomes. You can write it 2n, or you can also write the 46 number of chromosomes. This cell, it's called as oogonium, or you can also call it as a female germ cell. Okay, so the female germ lining that contains a specialized cell, that is called as an oogonium. From this, the process starts. I have already told you when the process starts. The process starts during the embryonic development. Okay, and now it enters into a first phase, that is called as a multiplication. Okay, multiplication, that means here this oogonium, it multiply rapidly by a process called as mitosis. Here they continue to divide, and many oogonia are going to form. There are lots of oogonia, they are going to be formed. Okay, because here continuous multiplication occurs. So thus the oogonia are formed, and this is called as, or this phase is called as, this It is called as multiplication phase. What it is called as? Multiplication phase. The oogonium, they rapidly multiply, okay, and that leads to this. When it occurs, the process, it occurs during fetal development. Okay, so you can also say it occurred during a fetus development. Means when the baby is inside the womb, at that time the process starts. Okay. Now I will take any one oogonia from it. Like say for an example, I will consider this. Okay. Now it increases in the size. It becomes rich in DNA content, RNA, and the nucleolus. They get more concentrated, and this phase is called as a growth phase. Okay, it's called as a growth phase. Okay, and the cell which is going to be formed, this is called as primary oocyte. What it is called as? Primary oocyte. Thus the primary oocyte is going to be formed. So we have finished the first two phases, which is called as multiplication phase, and the second one is called as a growth phase. What happens in a multiplication phase? Okay, the multiplication phase usually occurs during the fetus development or fetal development, where oogonium or the oogonia cells, they divide by a process called as mitosis. You know the meaning of mitosis? Where from one cell two daughter cells are produced and the number of chromosome in parent and daughter cell remains the same. So it continues to divide and many oogonia are going to be formed. Okay. Remember one thing, the oogonia formation that occurs during the fetus development, after birth, no more oogonia are added. Whatever the number of oogonia that have been formed afterwards or after a birth, no extra or more number of oogonia are added into it. Whatever the numbers are formed, that remains as such. Okay. Now here it's a condition called as a birth. After birth, there is no formation. Okay, there is no formation. Okay, after birth, now lady reaches a certain stage, okay, of maturity. This is called as puberty. So now what happens between a birth and puberty? Okay, this process occurs before a birth, when there is a development of embryo inside the womb. When it is inside a womb, this process occurs with it. Now we will see what happens during this birth phase, between a birth and puberty. Okay, so after a birth, no more oogonia are added. Okay, the oogonia are not added after a birth. Okay, and now the growth phase starts and the primary oocyte develops. Okay, so now we have to see how the process is going to occur. This primary oocyte that enters into a first meiotic division, meiosis 1, okay, and it gets arrested into a prophase 1 of meiosis 1. It gets arrested, temporarily gets arrested, okay, in the prophase 1 of meiosis 1. Okay, any doubt? During this phase, that primary oocyte which is going to be formed, that enters into a meiosis 1 or prophase 1 of meiosis 1, and now further division, they gets arrested. Okay, so now what happens next? See, now I am showing over here what happens to this primary oocyte. We are discussing this process, what we call it as oogenesis. So now what we have? We have primary oocyte. This is primary oocyte. Okay. Now between a birth and puberty, what happens to this primary oocyte and what kind of the changes that occurs in it, that I am showing over here, so you can easily understand. Now this primary oocyte, that is going to be surrounded by, this is primary oocyte, that is going to be surrounded by a layer of granulosa cell. Remember, this is the primary oocyte that is surrounded by the layer of granulosa cells. Okay, this is the granulosa layer. Okay, and that is surrounded to what? This is called as primary oocyte. This is primary oocyte. You can also write like this, primary oocyte. Okay, so the layer which is surrounding to it, that is called as primary follicles. What it is called as? Primary follicles. Okay, so what development or what kind of changes that takes place into a primary oocyte? I again repeat, we have this, I have just shown this primary oocyte over here. Okay, this primary oocyte, surrounding to this primary oocyte, there is a development of granulosa layer. There is a development of a granulosa layer. Okay, this granulosa layer which is surrounded to a primary oocyte, this is called as primary follicles. Between birth and puberty, many primary follicles which are going to be formed, these are the primary follicles which are going to be formed, many of the primary follicle, it gets ruptured, and at the puberty, when it reaches a puberty, how many gets left? Only 60,000 to 80,000 primary follicles are present in each ovary. This much number of primary follicles that remain in each ovary. Okay, though the lots of oogonia or the thousands of oogonia or millions of oogonia have been formed, but at the maturity only 60,000 to 80,000 of these follicles that remains in each ovary. Okay, now what happens? This layer which has been developed, next stage, what happens? This is the primary oocyte. Okay, this is a primary oocyte that is surrounded by a layer, what we call it as primary follicles. Okay, only how many left? That is 60,000 to 80,000 primary follicles left in each ovary. The remaining, they get ruptured. Now this primary follicle, that is becoming a thick, more layer of granulosa are added, more layers. There are addition of more layers of granulosa on it. Okay, and thus it becomes secondary follicle. Okay, and the inner one is, this one is called as a primary oocyte. So now what is the condition? The primary oocyte is surrounded by a secondary follicle by addition of more number of cells. Okay, now what happens? The next stage which is going to be start, and that in that, this is primary oocyte, and that is surrounded by again a more layer, and so that's why the secondary follicle now gets converted to a tertiary follicles. It gets converted to a tertiary follicles, and this is the primary oocyte which remains itself. Okay, in a tertiary follicle there is a presence of a fluid filled cavity that is present in the tertiary follicle. This is the characteristic. A fluid filled cavity, you can find it in a tertiary follicle. This fluid filled cavity, what you can find, it's called as antrum. It's called as an antrum. Okay, I again repeat, during the changes which takes place in the growth phase, the primary oocyte that is surrounded by the layer of granulosa, and this layer is called as primary follicle. Again, more addition of a layer of follicles, okay, or granulosa cells, and it becomes a secondary follicles. Secondary follicles now converts to a tertiary follicles. It converts to a tertiary follicles. Okay, clear? Apart from that, what happens? Apart from addition of a granulosa layer over here, okay, there is also an addition of a, you can say a layer, what we call it as theca. This is the theca which is going to be added, and then organize this theca into two parts. internal theca and external theca. Internal and external theca. The layers, what is a theca? Theca is just the addition of a layer, okay, that takes place. When it reaches a tertiary follicle, the meiotic process which is arrested, they gets completed, and what forms? Here two unequal cells are formed. Unequal. It's a meiosis, so half number of chromosome. So two unequal. So one cell becomes a large and the another cell becomes a small. The large cell which is going to be formed, this is called as secondary oocyte. What it is called as secondary oocyte. And the smaller cell which is going to be formed, this is called as first polar body. Okay, this is called as first polar body. Okay, so after formation of a tertiary follicle, this is a tertiary follicle, the meiotic, first meiotic division, meiosis 1, it gets over and it forms two cells, one large cell and one small cell. The large cell is called as secondary oocyte and the smaller one is called as first polar body. The content of this primary oocyte, most of the contents of this primary oocyte like cytoplasm and other thing, DNA, that remains with the secondary oocyte. Only the small portion of primary oocyte that goes with a first polar body. Okay. Now in this secondary oocyte, what happens? After this tertiary follicle, there is a formation of tertiary follicle. Now this tertiary follicle, that's converted to a Graafian follicle, or it can also be called as mature follicle. Okay, and there is a development of one more layer surrounding to it, the layer which is going to be formed surrounding to a secondary oocyte, right over here. The layer which is going to be formed surrounding to a secondary oocyte, the new layer which is going to be formed, that is called as zona pellucida. What it is called as zona pellucida. The layer, one more layer which is going to be formed surrounding to a secondary oocyte. Okay, this is called as zona pellucida. Now this secondary oocyte, okay, that is released by rupture of this Graafian follicle. Graafian follicle gets ruptured, break. So the secondary oocyte which is present in it, that gets break. Okay, now here it's a tertiary follicle. Tertiary follicle converts to a Graafian follicle. During this time, the primary oocyte converts to a secondary oocyte. Now when the Graafian follicle ruptures, the secondary oocyte which is present in it, it also gets breakdown. Okay, and that leads to a liberation of a secondary oocyte. This process, a liberation process, is called as ovulation. What's called as ovulation? I write over here. The process of release of this secondary oocyte, that is called as ovulation. So now there are two possibilities. Either this secondary oocyte gets fertilized or this secondary oocyte doesn't get fertilized. If it gets fertilized, means a fusion of that secondary oocyte and the sperm takes place. Then the second meiosis process, meiosis 2, that's a second stage in a meiosis that occurs. If doesn't get fertilized, then all this content, they are going to be removed into a menstrual fluid. Okay, so this is secondary oocyte. If it gets fertilized, then it leads to a formation of one more cell, okay, that contains another small cell. Okay, the big cell which is going to be produced, that's called as ovum. The other one is called as second polar body. Okay, and thus the process is going to occur. Okay, so that's about a process called as oogenesis. I again repeat how the process is going to occur. The oogenesis process. The oogenesis process means a process of formation of an ovum or egg cell. This is called as oogenesis. Okay, when it occurs, the process occurs during, or it starts, okay, and more specifically say it starts during the embryonic development. It occurs in how many stages? 3. Multiplication phase, growth phase, and this phase is called as a maturation phase. Alright, this is called as maturation phase. This multiplication phase it occurs before birth. Before birth this process starts. Means when the baby is developing in the womb, the process is already finished. Okay. In that the oogonia, they multiply by mitosis process and many oogonia are formed. Multiple, I think millions of oogonia are going to be formed. Okay. And the process occurs during the fetal development. Once a birth, after birth, no more oogonia are added. Okay. Then there is a phase start, what we call it as growth phase. In a growth phase, the cell becomes larger in size and all the content becomes more concentrated. Like cytoplasm, DNA, RNA, nucleolus, they all becomes more concentrated, and this is called as primary oocyte. Okay. After the birth, no more oogonia are added. Now what happens to this primary oocyte? This primary oocyte that enters into a prophase 1 of meiosis 1, and its growth is further arrested, or maturation process is arrested. During that, certain changes takes place. Primary oocyte that is surrounded by a layer of granulosa, and that is called as primary follicle. Now to this primary follicle, more layers are added and it converts to a secondary follicle. Okay, more layer of granulosa. Along with that, there is also addition of one more theca. Okay, now this secondary follicle converts to a tertiary follicle. How would you identify a tertiary follicle? The tertiary follicle has a fluid filled cavity, what we call it as antrum. And that theca layer which is already added during this stage, they are organized into internal theca and external theca. Okay. Now this tertiary follicle, it converts to a Graafian follicle. Okay. When it is converting tertiary follicle to a Graafian follicle, the primary oocyte which is present in it completes its first meiosis. Those which is arrested, it completes it, and it forms two cells. One large cell, the another one is small cell. The large cell is called as secondary oocyte, and that is surrounded by a layer called as zona pellucida. And the small cell that is formed, this is called as first polar body. Now there are two possibilities to this secondary oocyte: either fertilized or doesn't fertilized. If it fertilized, then ovum is produced, and if it is not fertilized, all the content gets ruptured and they are going to be discharged along with a menstrual fluid. So this process is called as oogenesis. So students, learn it properly. It's very important, okay, towards the examination point of view. Okay, keep learning, keep watching. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe this channel. Okay, thank you once again.